must not be blinded by our own need for power. This is the moment. Your choices will decide the fate of this world. And all that inhabit it. Make the right one.
Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the Changeling in Total War Warhammer 3 Shadows of Change for both Immortal Empires and Realms of Chaos. This is in Immortal Empires. Now there's quite a few things I do appreciate. One of the things that I do like is that the narrative stuff of the DLC is in both Immortal Empires and in Realms of Chaos. So you don't need to bother with Realms of Chaos if you want to experience the story. Though if you just care about doing that as quickly as possible, you might want to do it because it's probably going to be slower in Immortal Empires. But let's talk about the Changeling. He's got the first real stealth campaign in the entirety of the Total War series. If we look at the Changeling, he does get a bunch of benefits that help him with that. So looking at the Changeling, he gets the ability as a Lord effect to shapeshift into other bludgeoning lords and heroes. This is done through the Formless Horror, so I can turn into Nakari over here for whatever reason. I can turn into Vlad. I don't know how I got Nakari, to be quite honest, because I certainly didn't find Nakari. But over here I can turn into Nakari, I can turn into Vlad, I can turn into Acold Hellbrass, I can turn into Barist Houndbringer. So you do have the ability to do so. And he's a spellcaster by default, but imagine having the melee power that Nakari has, or Scarbrand does have, or Malice Darkblade, or Vlad. He does have the lore of Tzeentch. He does have a bit of an interesting skill line when it comes to his melee ability, but also his regular combat ability, because he does have he does have the ability of getting extra ammunition. He's a spellcaster by default, but he can also do decently well in melee. His special skill line gives him benefit to cultist actions, hero crew rank for cultists, passive guardian for lords and embedded heroes in his army. He gets an upkeep of minus 20% in enemy and or race territory, minus 25% upkeep for enemy armies in local, or plus 25% upkeep for enemy armies in local province, reduces the enemy casualty replenishment rate, and also increases his own casualty replenishment rate in enemy or raised territory. He does get a benefit to diplomacy with the request army cost being reduced and gaining more allegiance points, and also reducing the upkeep of allied armies. He gets a reinforcement range benefit and a casualty replenishment benefit for allies. On top of that, he gets reload time reduction, melee attack, melee defense for units recruited via allied recruitment, excluding Tzeentch units. So he can't buff Tzeentch units. He does get, he reduces campaign movement range for enemies and increases his own campaign movement range and also decreases control. And then he gets further reinforcement change, has missile resistance, and also has some significant benefits for Forsaken, Caspon, and Mutalic Vortex beasts in terms of speed, weapon strength, and crucially, barrier. He does get the Trickster staff, which gives them Winds of Magic, Siege Corruption in the local province, and also Deceiving Shadows, which creates a mirror image of him. He's pretty powerful in battle, and of course you do get the Tsargors as a unit. The way the Tsargors work, like looking at the unit recruitment that Tzeentch does have, it's very similar to what we had before, except that you're no longer restricted by tiers, you're restricted by resources in terms of unlocking stuff. But the Tsargors can be recruited from the tier 2 mini-eye tribute. And this is something you're going to want to get, obviously, for the heroes, for the units, for warriors, gas, you'd want to get this as quickly as possible to get Forsaken and to get Sargors as quickly as possible, because you will be able to dominate your enemies with those. Now, how does the Changeling work on the campaign map? Well, quite very interesting, I would say. So you start over here in Stirland. You do start with a cult over here in Flensburg. And you start with right next to Needling. And the Beastmen are still over here. You do start at war with Stirland. You start with a tier with the sliver of potential over here in terms of unit recruitment, but you're going to want to get Forsaken as quickly as possible. Now, here's how the Changeling mechanics work on the campaign map. When you take over a settlement, you can either build a cult or raise the settlement. Cults cannot be destroyed, which is pretty surprising. Like, it doesn't matter if the settlement is razed to the ground. For instance, here, it was razed to the ground. It doesn't matter if another faction takes it over. Cults cannot be destroyed, with exception of them being potentially detected in the same way that the Undersea can be detected, but you have ways of avoiding that. Now, here's how cults can be set up. You can either set them up with an army when you take over a settlement, or you can get certain agents that are a limited resource. They're a finite resource, but you're looking at the trickster cultist. So what these guys do, when they're targeting a settlement, they can either set up a symbiotic trickster cult, a military trickster cult, or parasitic trickster cult. So let's set up a symbiotic trickster cult in Zarnagrund over here. And this, and parasitic, symbiotic in itself can be absolutely ridiculous. Because like over here, this structure over here, the mercantile illusion, gives you an enormous portion of the income from a settlement. So playing this character on legendary difficulty will net you an absurd level of money. So that's how you build cults. It doesn't matter what kind of cult you do, the choice of a cult, all it does is it changes which structures are initially built over here. So over here, let's say I build a military trickster cult just to showcase, this is not the serious campaign, but just to showcase what it does. You'd get a bunch of military buildings over here instead, for instance. But you can always destroy those, you can swap them around. So for instance, if I want to build symbiotic, or if I want to build parasitic in the settlement, I can do so. I can also switch between structures very easily. So if I want to switch from the Court of Visitors Parliament of Allies into the parasitic building, which increases diplomatic relations and casualty replenishment rate, I can do so. It does take quite a few turns. It does take resources. Now, structures, all kinds of structures in a cult require not only money, but they also require cult supplies. Cult supplies are probably going to be the one main bottleneck in your campaign after a certain period of time. Now, cult supplies are gained from technology, they're gained from schemes, and they're gained from buildings as well. So, for instance, both parasitic and symbiotic, military just means it constructs military buildings, but really cults are they're symbiotic or parasitic. Symbiotic cults have a reduced discoverability and create a symbiotic relationship with the host element. Parasitic are pushing the corruption higher, push the discoverability higher, but generally have bigger benefits. So, for instance, a symbiotic building that creates cult supplies would generate less of those supplies than a parasitic one. That's the difference. If we look at the building browser, so you have 5 buildings in symbiotic, 5 buildings in parasitic. You have the main one, which is the Sanctum, which creates grimoires, which you still use, and creates cult supplies as well, which are the main bottleneck. Then you have the main economic building. And each of these buildings has a similar building in the other tree. So, for instance, you can't have both. Like, you can't have both the Sanctum Subterfuge or the House of Havoc. And the House of Havoc in a settlement, you have to choose. Same with Mercantile Illusion versus the Bloodied Vault. So Sanctum Subterfuge versus House of Hag, like Mercantile Illusion versus the Bloodied Vault. Twisted Valerie versus the Chamber of Agony. And then you have 2 special buildings that do things that are different, but they also work in a similar way. So here's how this will work. So these 3 buildings are the main buildings. These 2 are special buildings that you construct for specific purposes. But there is a final building over here that's only in Parasitic, that is exclusive to Parasitic, I believe. But let's just go over this. So you get the Legion of the Changeling, which you can construct in a symbiotic settlement, though the precursor to that, which takes 2 turns, will increase the discoverability by 100. Then when you get this to tier 5, an army loyal to the Changeling is summoned upon building completion. So you can build armies over here, but you got to deal with the discoverability. You get the Parliament of Lies, which improves diplomatic relations with the settlement owner over time. So for instance, over here, with Karl Franz, even though he hates me for many, many obvious reasons, including the -100 aversion, I have 40 positive diplomatic relations. Also, it seems factions are not quite willing to declare war on you as the Changeling. I actually haven't had a single faction in the campaign so far by turn 32 declaring war on me. I'll talk about why that is, because I have a theory on that. So you can improve diplomatic relations. You also have the Twisted Valerie or the Chamber of Agony, which the Twisted Valerie has a lower effect but costs less and has a smaller discoverability penalty, half the discoverability penalty, but it has half the chance of expanding a trickster cult to an adjacent region. So you can use this building to expand the cult, similar to how you can expand an Undercity for the Skaven. One is just better than other, but there is a penalty, of course, for it. If we're looking at Parasitic, instead of stealing income, which generally on higher difficulties will end up working the better, because you're also, but keep in mind, you're also buffing the income of the old buildings for the owner in order to make this work. That's how it works. The Bloodied Vault instead just generates income and weakens the economy of the owner. So if you are going to fight the owner, you might want to build a bunch of Bloodied Vaults. Say, for instance, if you're fighting Grimgor, you might just want to starve his entire economy. Though the ability of doing so on Legendary, I would probably call that into question, considering the huge amount of money the AI gets by default. See, it's not like the AI economy is better because the buildings are generating that much more money. No, it's because they have a strong amount of background income. It's because they have lower upkeep, lower costs. So I'm not sure how much the Bloodied Vault would work. I'd say the best purpose of the Bloodied Vault is if you have a ruined region over here, like over here, then you can build the Bloodied Vault to get some income. It is a decent amount of income that you can get for it, but the main way you're going to make money as the Changeling is either raising settlements or building mercantile illusions in key settlements, especially provincial capitals, or settlements like the Plain of Zar. Hell, you know that Skaven settlement that's over here? I would probably want to build a mercantile illusion over there as well to get a significant amount of income. Okay. Then, going back to the buildings, we do get the reality wound that we can build. This is the alternative to the Dark Ritual building chain. And this summons an army of demonic rebels, hostile to everyone, that will arrive through a rift upon building completion. So if you want a faction to suffer but don't want to declare war on them, the reality wound is maybe the better choice versus the Legion of the Changeling. Then the exclusive building to Parasitic is the Ravaging Host. The settlement is plundered upon building completion, stealing wealth, and damaging the owner's buildings. And income is based on a development level. There are bugs people have reported. I'm not quite sure if, say, for instance, the Ravaging Host works. I mean, in terms of stealing the income, because I built it, and I don't know if I actually got any kind of money for it, to be honest. Though I did reduce Altdorf's level, though. Reichland is currently at war with Kemmler. Fun fact, the practical implications of you doing all of this, you being in the Empire, well, Karl Franz ended up being substantially more powerful because of what I ended up doing. So instead of being this asshole to the Empire, the Changeling can actually be a net benefit, at least if you're playing him. Now, other things that are unique to the Changeling. The research tree is similar to what Kairos has, though the first thing you're going to research is going to give you 10% casualty replenishment. It's like, Creative Assembly, do you just love to shove the knife in the wound? Because, like, I'll get to Kairos in just a second. Let's just say that isn't a great situation. But you get 10% casualty replenishment. And I don't know, how about having better casualty replenishment for the race as a whole? I don't know. Just an idea there. You can get extra global recruitment. You can get benefits to changing of ways. You can get all the other things in research that, for instance, Kairos already had. The unique things in terms of research are... the unique things in terms of research are the trickster rifts as well as the trickster cultists. So the trickster cultists are special agents that are limited resources that are very difficult to unlock. To get that, you need to do schemes. The rifts are also tied to schemes. Schemes are basically campaign objectives. Like the way you play in battle is very similar to Kairos, so you do have a great deal of potential in battle as well, not just magical but also melee ability, because if you can change in other lords and heroes. How do the schemes work? Let's go over that. Changing of ways is pretty much very similar. Some things have been removed. The main thing that really matters over here is you do get the ability of spreading corruption. How do schemes work? So, these are the schemes. So you get schemes in the Battlelands, Bretonnia, Darklands, Grand Cathay, Lustria, Nagrand, Northkind, Kislev, Empire, and Ulthuan. You start in the Empire, so you're going to want to do the schemes of the Empire. Now, schemes give you various benefits. So, for instance, the scheme that I did over here, which required me to either get the Ravaging Host or sack Altdorf, I chose the Ravaging Host, gave me a steam tank as a regiment of renown. Yes, the Changeling is a true industrial powerhouse because he has a steam tank. That is a hilarious situation over there. I don't remember where there it is. So I am running around with a steam tank. Other things, like you can get upkeep for all armies, dependent on the objectives you're filling. So, for instance, one of the objectives is to eliminate Festus. This will give you 10% casualty replenishment. Another objective is to infiltrate a settlement in the Empire with the Trickster cult. And this will reveal the terrain around the theater. So, the reason I'm seeing... like who controls what in the Empire is because I did that objective. Going back to the Empire, like once you do a certain number of objectives, it's free schemes. Once you do free schemes, you will get a grand scheme. And the grand scheme will give you a bunch of benefits. In this case, this gave me a Trickster Rift, this gave me a surplus of supplies, and the Electric Counts descended into Civil War, though it didn't seem to work all that well. So, and the Empire will not show up in the ultimate scheme. So the ultimate scheme is the final battle. You need to do five grand schemes in order to unlock the ultimate scheme, the final battle of the campaign. So Trickster Rifts, the way it works is you get that resource and then you can open a rift. This works in a similar way to Be'lakor. So a rift... I have an army over here in the rift. I've already teleported the Changeling. You can traverse rifts, only your rifts. You can't use Be'lakor's rift. You can traverse the rifts you've built. So for instance, I'm going to send this army over here to Cathay. It's not going to arrive instantly. It is going to take a turn for them to do the travel into the other region. And agents are increased. Agents are increased by doing schemes as well. So, so if you So for instance, if I were to win 15 land battles in the Empire, I would get another trickster cultist. And the way this works is you unlock a trickster cultist through a scheme, and then you can send him to a region. And he'll be able to build you a settlement, a parasitic, a symbiotic, a military settlement in the area you've sent him to. You may not even move your entire army and still be able to cause a great deal of havoc in that region. Because, for instance, I could send a trickster cultist once I have one to Illustria and starts building up cults. Cults cannot be destroyed. And they give you, unless they're detected, and they're very hard to detect, especially if you're using symbiotic. Now, all these theaters, all these schemes, like, they'll end up with a major battle and significant benefits for yourself and significant issues. So if we look at the Darklands, which is where I'm starting over here, we have the various local. The small schemes, the regular schemes, that can give me a number of benefits. And once I do 3 of these, I will get the grand scheme, which will result in a battle, and Greenskin allies will support you. So you're not just removing enemies for the final battle, you're also getting allies. So it's like you're going to get Grimgor as an ally. Greenskin laborers will rise up in rebellion against overseers, and I'll get the form of Gorda's backstabber. And I'll get an additional trickster rift. Now, how do I feel about this? Well, it is a lot of fun, to be quite honest. I am enjoying this a great deal. I can't say I care much for the army playstyle of Tzeentch. Sargors do spice things up, because you're not just using Forsaken anymore. In fact, you might only want to use Sargors. But the campaign mechanics are genuinely a lot of fun. I am enjoying myself a great deal. I think the Changeling is certainly the highlight of this DLC. Now, what about poor Kairos Fateweaver, who has been one of the worst legendary lords in the game for a very long time? Well, he got nothing. No improved research tree to, say, for instance, giving the same casualty replenishment that the Changeling has. No major changes to any of his mechanics except changing of ways, and it's only minor changes. Some stuff removed, UI changed, but really it's mostly the same thing that Kairos does have. His economy, which is one of the sore spots, hasn't really been changed at all. Based on what I can see, it still works in this exact same way. He does get a landmark that wasn't there before, if I'm not mistaken, the Glacial Caves at Tier 4 in his starting settlement. But that is it. Like, there's no major changes for Kairos. There's no major changes for Tzeentch. It's just like all the new campaign mechanics that the Changeling has. Now, they do work. They're fun. But I'll be honest in what I wanted more for Kairos. And not just Kairos over here. Kostin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.